Well, as we begin this next module, let's use a short video clip to introduce our subject. As a professional electrician, you will need to properly prepare and terminate thousands of wire ends during your career. In today's lesson, we will learn how to prepare a 12-gauge wire for termination on a standard receptacle like you saw demonstrated in our introductory video. However, the steps we learn will be used for every kind of wire termination throughout your career. I strongly recommend that you commit these steps to memory. Make them as natural as driving your car. Our student performance objective for this evening then is, given a length of wire and an electrical receptacle, a wire stripping tool, eye protection, gloves, and a handout with step-by-step instructions, each of you will don the proper personal protective equipment, assess the wire gauge, choose the correct stripping notch, assess the correct length of insulation to be removed using the receptacle stripping gauge, step by step, and then strip the correct length of insulation from the wire, such that there are no personal injuries, the conductor is not damaged, and the bare conductor matches the receptacle stripping gauge. You should have a handout that looks like this with 8 steps on it. You can follow along as I go through them one by one. The first step is to don the proper personal protective equipment for stripping wire. As you know from previous lessons, whenever you have a job, you have to assess that job for safety. We're going to be stripping wire and little ends of maybe flying places, so we have to wear some sort of safety glasses. We also are going to be using some cutters, so we need to have some hand protection. It's also a good idea to have hand protection because as you strip all day long, the wire can cause blisters on your hands. Our second step is to examine the wire for the gauge and stranding of the conductor. In a previous lesson, you were shown how to read the writing that's stamped on the insulation. In this lesson, you will use that to determine the wire gauge. In this case, it's a 12-gauge solid conductor. The third step is to take our wire strippers and notice that there are a number of notches on the wire strippers. They're labeled on the wire strippers. And with these wire strippers, the second notch from the bottom is labeled 12-gauge solid. So I will use those. Our fourth step is to examine the device that we're going to land the wire on, in this case a receptacle. On the back of the receptacle there is a wire stripping gauge. I have made this one white so that it's a little bit easier to see. You take your wire and you lay it on the stripping gauge and you hold your fingers in such a manner that it helps gauge your wire length for your strippers. You take your strippers now and using your fingers you can clamp the wire strippers on the wire at the proper spot and clamp down. You'll feel the strippers cut through the insulation. Be careful to keep the strippers perpendicular to the wire. Don't tip it one way or the other, or it will nick the wire. Then begin stripping to the right and pulling it off the end, like that. Now we're going to look at the stripped portion and make sure that we haven't nicked it somewhere. If we nick it, it's kind of like glass. If it vibrates or bends very much, it will break. Then we take the wire, wire and compare it to the gauge and see that we've cut it the correct length. If it's too short, the next step is, if it's too short, then you strip a little bit more. If it's too long, you can use your cutters to trim it off a little bit. Do you have any questions? No? Well, let's cover a couple of questions from me to you. Bob, tell me, why is it important to strip wire while thinking step by step? Yes, that's right. When we develop a pattern like this, then we are sure to always strip it precisely and exactly right, matching the device that we're stripping it for. Jim, what's the first step? That's right, like in all exercises, the first step is to assess your safety and don your safety equipment. Bill, what's the last step? Yes, that's right. We inspect and examine and adjust to make certain that what we have done matches the device that we've done the work for. Now we'll do some guided and independent practice.